What's good? It's Kurt Ingram, aka the Vegan Warrior. And I'm coming at you with another live broadcast. I can no longer say uncensored. I am censored. Why am I censored? Well, to keep it short and simple, which, you guys know I struggle with keeping things short and simple with my long live streams. Everything I've been saying over the years on YouTube, social media, whatever, I'm speaking for myself. When I get on here and I'm matter of fact and I'm in your face and I'm calling you out, or I'm calling the control system out, and I'm sharing my opinion, I am doing it on my personal behalf. I'm doing it from my inner self to the world. I want people to know how I feel about a particular topic. And I represent only one entity, me. That's how I've been since day one. And by doing that, over the years, it's approaching over 10 years now. Getting old. I've paid the consequence. I've paid heavily over the years for me being so vocal in social media. How have I paid? Well, my first channel ever for YouTube was right around 50,000 people or something, subscribers. I talked the same exact way that I talk today. I probably was more harsh back then. More matter of fact, more in your face, more unapologetic, I've gotten a little softer in my old age, as time moved forward. There was no consequence that I cared about. So in return, when my channels get extremely big and people start subscribing and all that good stuff, thousands of comments and people engaging in my topics that I introduced to the internet, the common response would always be YouTube shutting me down. So they shut down my first channel. I can't tell you how many times I've been called a bully. There's so many metrosexual men, in particular, in this world, intimidated by someone with a strong opinion who can defend their opinion, that they would prefer to censor you than confront you. And we're only talking intellectual here. I mean, it's not like you're squaring off with a guy twice your size in a room, and it's just you against him. But we're talking about my mind versus your mind. There's metrosexual feminine men who fear that. I am a threat to them. I know that. Many of them are staunch liberals. Many of them are just people who can't handle opposing views. I understand that. So over the years, I've learned that I have this dominating era about me. And if you think it's bad on YouTube, you should see it in person. I'm a big opposing guy who has an opinion. And my size and my stature isn't the most dangerous. It's my intellect. Just as strong as I am physically, I'm also that strong mentally as well. So in reference to being online, I intimidate a lot of people. YouTube has confirmed that a number of times. They've shut my channel down at least 5 times. I scare the shit out of weak ass people. That's what I do. So I come back with a second channel and I say, okay, well, let me tone it down a little bit, but I'm not going to change who I am. It doesn't matter because I'm not here to get fans. I'm not here to get likes. I'm not here to be popular. I've been popular all my life. Literally all my life I've been popular. My entire life. I was that guy in school that everybody knew. Captain of the football team, captain of the wrestling team. Popular guy. Getting to college, same exact way. Outside of college, same exact way. So I don't need popularity. I don't need celebrity. I don't need any of that. I've always had that since I was a kid. So I'm not only here to do that. See, many people do YouTube because they never got their shot at being a rapper. They never got their shot at being a great athlete. They never got a shot at being that guy that everybody talked about. You know, I did all that. I was literally that guy. You know, girls, never a problem. Never in my life have I had a problem with a woman. Getting a woman, being with the prettiest girl in school, prettiest girl on campus, that was me. I always had her. So when I get on YouTube, I'm not looking for that type of stuff because I've already had that type of stuff. I'm looking for a meeting of the minds. I'm looking to link with people who are also strong mentally, who can broaden my own horizons, and at the same time I could share some of the things that move me as well. So I'm looking for a connection. So censoring what I say, in my opinion, impacts my objective. My objective is to stimulate conversation where we can move closer to the truth together. You know, if I talk to somebody, and I've done this a number of times, talk to somebody and I find out, well, damn, I never thought about that. He has a great point. Let me look at his point or her point, and now let me reevaluate what I was thinking to possibly get closer to the truth. I enjoy that. I literally enjoy that. I am a conversationalist. This is what I do. If you think I talk a lot on this, you should see me one-on-one. I can talk to anybody. Hours and hours and hours of conversation. A meeting of the minds is what moves me, right? So when I do these live streams that are unscripted, many times I don't even have my subjects and topics all put together. I kind of do it as it develops in my mind. Like right now, I don't know what I'm going to say next until it comes out. That's just how I am. I've been like this since I was a little boy. That level of freedom, along with that level of power, because it's self-power to be in this state, right? Intimidates a lot of people. So I'll have trolls come into my chat, try to, derail the conversation because they don't like the conversation or they're intimidated by my delivery or whatever. Put me on YouTube's radar, and then they look at it and they say, well, yeah, this guy is pretty aggressive. He's really matter of fact. And his content could be inflammatory. Let's take down his channel. I believe that's what they do. They hide behind things like copyright infringement and shit. I'd never do copyright infringement. Never. Everything I show, I pull off the public domain. So how am I infringing on somebody's copyrights? That's bullshit. Take down my third channel. Okay. It doesn't matter to me because my objective is to develop that connection. That's my objective, right? So no matter how much YouTube takes me down, I take it on as a challenge. Okay, you take me down, I'm coming back with another channel. Take me down, I'm coming back with another channel. Take me down, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Why? Because it's only me. YouTube means nothing to me. I'm only here because this is where you are. I have a thirst to connect with human beings. Human beings make up YouTube. YouTube itself as an organization, I can't stand it. Can't stand it because they engage in censorship. Anyone that can't handle an opposing view is a coward. And that's the way I see YouTube. Or those who control YouTube, right? So they take down my channel. I challenge YouTube, and they get wind of it, and then they make up bullshit, and they take down my channel. Some of you have witnessed this. If you don't know, this is my 5th channel. And the reason the numbers are low, as far as subscribers and all that, is for multiple reasons. One, they don't advertise anything I ever say, right? No matter how many likes it get, thumbs up and all that shit. But I don't care. If there's one person watching this live stream, it's worth it. If it's 100, cool. If it's 1,000, cool. If it's 1,000,000, okay. 1,000,000 people are into it. I'm still going to do me. I'm still going to be me. That's how I roll. That's just how I am. But there's been a shift. There's been a change that I must consider because it's kind of, what's that saying that they always say? If you do things over and over and over again, but you expect a change, that's the definition of crazy. That's kind of like what I've been doing all these years. I've been thinking if I just stay the course and do it over and over and over again, I'm going to get a positive result at some point. I'll never get a positive result out of the way our society is going. And again, it's this whole metrosexual destruction of masculinity approach to social media. But what's different now that I have to consider, I was talking to a very good friend about this. It's one thing to take on a what you view as a tyrannical system or unjust system or a system that is dedicated to censorship and is only about you. But when it includes other people, meaning I get on here and I say something that ignites resistance or an attack on me personally, but also those I represent as well, is it worth it then? Is it worth it that your friends and family and loved ones suffer because you're exercising something to express yourself, but when they come after you, they also hurt others? Is it worth it? And that's what my friend got me thinking about. He got me to thinking about it. Right now, I am involved in something that is so fucking successful. I will use that word, so successful, so lucrative, with financial potential that will go off of the charts. Because I get on this YouTube and I be myself, someone could literally destroy all that. Simply because they don't like me. What I must now consider is something that's bigger than me. See, if they were just attacking me, I could take on any fucking attack. You guys seen me. I will debate anybody and I will destroy anyone that I debate. I will. That's just how I am. I'm a debater. I can do it all day. But when people lose the debate and people don't like being checked by the vegan warrior, because he represents something else that is extremely successful, something that is literally helping tons of people, they could go around me because they can't destroy me and try to destroy something that I'm a part of. I can't allow that. I cannot allow that. I cannot allow something that I know I need to share with all of you. Every last one of you. Everybody is listening. If you don't know about what I've been talking about for the last few weeks, you're not going to know unless you talk to me personally one-on-one. Because at this point, I will no longer place the community that I'm a part of right now in harm's way. Meaning someone attacking something that is benefiting my friends, my family, my partners, other entrepreneurs, other investors, just to get at me. I can't allow that. I cannot allow that. So, what I've done, if you haven't already noticed, there are no more live streams on this channel. Now, you guys know I do long live streams. I do 4-hour live streams, 8-hour live streams. My longest live stream is 13 hours straight. It's not there no more. Because what happens is when your enemies can't take you on head on, every time I go live, my panel is open. I put the link in the chat and I say, hey, if you want to talk about this, we ain't even got to argue. We ain't got to fuss. We don't got to fight. We don't got to do none of that. Click the link and you could talk to me live in front of everybody. Very few people take that opportunity because most people probably know they're not going to win their argument if their position is weak, right? And inherently, most people know when their position is weak, and they don't want to go there. But what they will do to be deceitful and cowardly, they'll try to dismantle things that are important to you because they can't hurt you directly in intellectual discussion. They'll try to tear down something that you're a part of. And I've seen it happen. But in the past, I didn't care. Now I fucking care. What I'm involved in right now is so important that I'm not going to give anybody ammunition to try to tear it down. Where's the ammunition? Going on my channel and extracting videos and using that against me, but potentially hurting those who's also benefiting from those same things. I can't allow that. Inherently, my nature is to be a protector. I can't do something that's not going to protect those who I know are innocent. You can hate me till you fucking blue in the face. I can deal with your hate. But when you attack my friends and family, I can't allow that. Mentally, physically, or emotionally. I can't allow that. And again, what I am involved in now is so fucking major. I can't give my enemies ammunition. So, once I had this discussion with a very good friend, he brought this to my attention. He was like, dude, people could actually fuck up everything that we're trying to build. All these people we're helping, all this stuff that we're doing, everybody is benefiting, no complaints, people are making money, it's just blowing up. They could take you and how you present content online and take it out of context and not only attempt to hurt you, but hurt everyone else as well. And I had to think about it. And then I had to take this big ass ego I got and make it humble and think about it. Am I creating an unnecessary risk for those who I care about? And the answer is yes. So let them fucking idiots hear my live stream for 4 hours, 8 hours or whatever, and picking certain things out and putting together hit pieces on me and using that to attack something that includes a shitload of other people would be irresponsible for me. So my content, my live streams, will no longer be ammunition for haters. I'm still going to say what the fuck I want. I'm still going to talk the way I want. I'm still going to intimidate you with my masculinity. Because that's what I think the real issue is. You lack it, I got it, you don't like it, you don't feel comfortable. That's what I think it really is. You know, this is how it is. If I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong. Because the beautiful thing about this whole internet, YouTube land, fictitious world that we're in right now, you can always change the channel. You can always go to somebody that you like. But I have people who consciously sit and watch me, looking for opportunities to potentially destroy me, which could never happen. I'm destruction proof. But could you hurt those that I'm doing business with? Could you hurt those who are part of my team? I can't allow that. So you would no longer have ammunition in any way to hurt those that I'm affiliated with. That's why I'm talking in the abstract right now. You can't pinpoint what I'm talking about because you don't need to know what the fuck I'm talking about. The people that I work with know exactly what I'm talking about. And they know how important what we're doing right now is. And they know that I'm not the type of guy to back down from any type of fight, but at the same time, I got to be smart enough in how I fight. And I can be honest with you guys. In the past, I haven't been that smart. I'm of this opinion. I can say what the fuck I want when I want to say it. And if you don't like it, prove me wrong. You know. that approach I gotta evolve from. I gotta evolve from that approach. I gotta be calculating, a little more calculating, because now there's more than me at stake. If it was just me, I'll say whatever the hell I want to the day I die. I can't do that no more. What I'm involved in is too big. It's absolutely too big. So, if you go to my channel and you want to watch yesterday's live stream or every live stream I've done for the last 10 years, you're not going to find it. No more ammunition for haters. No more. So if they want to get me and catch me slipping up, they got to watch me live. You're not going to have the recording, be able to sit back with your coffee, analyzing every little word the Vegan Warrior says. That's not going to happen anymore. I know I'm a personality, and and I may be a personality that's not your cup of tea. So be it. But you're not going to be able to use my own content against me anymore. I ain't playing that game no more. I didn't care in the past. I now care. So, live streams that I feel may allow my team to be vulnerable will never make it to my channel. No more. It's a damn shame I had to wait to being censored on YouTube 5 different channels to realize this. But again, those other 4 channels, there was nothing at stake other than me against the world. But now it's my team. I gotta protect my team. So I can't leave content up on my page that will make us susceptible. Those days are over. It stops here and now. That includes all my little social media, which I really don't have a lot of social media. I got Facebook, and I got some new social media accounts that don't have nothing on it in particular. But here, somebody wanted to come after me and say that, you know, whatever, they could have looked at some of my content, and they have. They have looked at some of my content and used that as a means to attack those around me. I'm not going to let that happen anymore. So all that content is gone. But it goes to what I was showing you when I first started this live stream. Let me go back. With all of that said, I still need to promote uncensored platforms. This is Brother Odinga platform that he designed from scratch. This is his version of YouTube, but the difference is it's uncensored, 100% uncensored. And it's relatively new, and it's just as efficient as YouTube is. And there's already great content added to Brother Odinga's channel. That, you know, if you're a truther and you want to, you know, get the information out and all that, and get your EDU up, you can go there and you can watch some videos that are extremely powerful that promote the idea of the truth movement. So I'm going to start putting, because all my stuff is archived, and I've made tons of videos, right? I'm going to start uploading many of my videos from across all my 5 platforms, my 5 channels that have been taken down, or 4 channels that have been taken down. I'm on my 5th channel now. And I'm going to start uploading on his platform. Because he values free speech. See, that's the problem in this country. There's people that say they value free speech until they disagree with it. When they disagree with it, all of a sudden they don't value free speech anymore. There's a lot of fucking hypocrites in this country. You know, the right to free speech is one of those things that should never be infringed, as long as you're not hurting anyone or encouraging anyone to hurt someone. But just because you don't agree with it doesn't mean you have the right to censor that individual. You know what? Shutting down someone's channel and censoring people on the internet, you know what that's equivalent to? That's equivalent to book burning. See, back in the day, when you wanted to share information with people, you wrote a book. You arranged and creatively put together a text. And if you wanted to challenge the status quo, if you wanted to bring things to question and pose some solutions or whatever the case was in your book, you would write a book and you would offer it to the people. And people would get inside of your mind by reading your text. So what did they do in the past? Well, all the people that they didn't like, they would take all the books off the shelf, put in a big pile, and do a damn book burning event. That's what they did in the past. The equivalent to that today is censorship on social media. It's book burning. It's literally book burning. You don't like the content. You don't think nobody else should hear it. So therefore, let's throttle how many people actually see what the Vegan Warrior says. That's the game. So book burning has never stopped. Because think about it. People that wrote all those books, if they had the internet, would they have been on the internet doing what I'm doing? And what many of others have done? Absolutely. But they didn't have the internet. They didn't have the computer. So they wrote it down in text. And if they wrote something that the king didn't like or the government didn't like, they destroyed their books. So nobody could ever hear that person's opinion again. When YouTube shuts down a channel or a troll attacks an individual to get that channel taken down, it's equivalent to book burning. Modern day book burning. Good point. Thanks, Dropfire. You saying that my mic is up too high. Let me turn it down a little bit. It's weird because it doesn't say it's up too loud. How about now? Is that better? So anyway, Brother Odinga, he has his platform called Press View. And that's what you're seeing on the screen right now. That is his channel. Try to get over there and at least get an account. It's free. He has some really cool plans for the future. He wants to give, to distinguish his platform from other platforms, he wants to allow each channel to have its own private section. Meaning, you have a section for the public that anybody can just go check out, but also there's a private section. So let's say you have private content, like in this situation right now that I'm in, right? I have content that I know people can use against me that could not hurt me necessarily, but could hurt my team and other people I'm affiliated with. So because it's there, I can actually put it in a private place. I mean, if I was on Brother Dingo's channel, I could put my content in a private place, and when a trusted individual wanted to view it, they could go into that section of my channel and view the private stuff, right? That I deem to be private or not available for everyone in the public. He's gonna have a feature like that, you know, and it would be embedded in your channel. I thought that was a cool idea. That was something he shared with me. So again, if you haven't already done it, go open up an account with PressView. Just try it out and then give him a ton of feedback. Why? Because his objective is to make it just as good, if not better, than YouTube. And it's a place for truthers, people that want uncensored content. So check out PressView. Alright, so with this topic, I've been thinking maybe one of my problems is I'm a dying breed. You know, when I was growing up, men were strong. I can't name how many strong men that I seen as role models growing up. It was just so many. You know, there's people today that can't name a positive role model in their life, you know, without, you know, going to the TV set, or like, I'm talking about a role model that you could touch, you know, a role model that that was in your community. A lot of people struggle with that today. But when I grew up, they were everywhere. Strong men just doing their thing. And me admiring them as a young boy. Like, yeah, I want to be like that guy right there. You know, he wasn't a drug dealer. He wasn't a criminal. He wasn't a rapper. He wasn't a basketball player or a football player, even though I had a lot of football players that I just fucking loved. You know, one of the guys I loved as a football player when I was a kid? His name is O.J. Simpson. O.J. Simpson was such a good fucking football player. It was ridiculous how good he was. You know, but, you know, everything they say he did, even though I don't even think he killed his wife, but because people believe he did, he can't be a role model no more, right? But I grew up looking at O.J. Simpson, James Brown, who else can I name off the top? Jack Lambert, oh my God, middle linebacker for the Pittsburgh Steelers. You know, I used to watch everything he did on the football field, which prompted me playing linebacker when I got to college. You know, so if you go to the TV set, most of my heroes were athletes, right? But my everyday life, it was my father, it was my grandfather, it was all my uncles. I got 5 uncles. I worshiped the ground all of them walked on, you know. I had cousins who were just positive, strong men. I had one uncle in the 70s who was a Black Panther, right? He had the afro, he had the black on, he had the whole, you know, the whole get up. And I loved that uncle because he was so, like, matter of fact, right? He was the revolutionary, and I just thought he was cool. And I remember one time, and I'm like maybe 6, 7 years old, he said, come on, I'm going to take you to a rally with me in Philly, in North Philly. And it was a Black Panther rally. And they were, I don't even know what the hell they was raising hell about, but something happened, and it was like, power to the people, power to the people. Everybody got afros, everybody got the black on, leather. You know, the women looked just as, you know, ready to go as the men did. It was cool as shit, and I was a kid, and I couldn't see, and my uncle was real tall. He put me on his shoulders, and I just could see this whole sea of strong revolutionaries. You know, I didn't know what the politics was or what. It probably had something to do with, you know, civil rights or whatever the case was, right? But I was a kid just seeing all these strong people in the 70s, you know. Then in the 80s, strong people, you know, just strong. And then as I got older and I'm now becoming an adult, it could be I just lost the fantasy that my heroes were so perfect, you know. But as I got older, I started looking at outside of my inner circle of family members, and I just started seeing weak men started popping up all over the place. You know, so I kind of grew up seeing strong men, but as I got older, I started to see more and more weak men surface. And when I say a weak man, what's a weak man? Well, a man that doesn't accept responsibility for his actions. You know, it's everybody's fault but his. To me, that's a weak man. You know, because I grew up in an era where you couldn't make excuses. You make excuses, you was a coward. You know, if there was an issue between two men, they took it to the streets and they knuckled it up. You know, it wasn't no knives and guns and, you know, it was none of that. At least I don't remember it as a kid, you know, until I got older. And now we're in the 80s, and now the community is being ravaged with drug addicts and drug dealers, you know. But prior to that, it was just manhood, you know. And I'm going to tell you this. If you was a soft dude back in the day, girls didn't like you. Girls didn't even give you a chance. If you was just a soft dude. If a dude could not stand up to the woman's or the girl's brothers, right? Because the brothers were going to try you. Like if the girl said, okay, this is my new boyfriend, such and such, the brothers are staring them down like, we're going to test you. I can't tell you how many times I was tested. I met a girl, like her a lot. Finally, I come over her house to pick her up, to walk her to school, whatever the case is. Brother's all swole, the older brother, like, where you going with my sister? So I'm taking her to school. And I'm going to make sure don't nothing happen to her. And you ain't got nothing to worry about when she with me. That's what I want to hear, young man. And I'm going to hold you to that. Those are the kind of things that were said to us all the time. You know, you defended your woman, right? And if you didn't, there was a consequence. You had to deal with the father, you had to deal with the cousins, you had to deal with the uncles, the brothers. You know, nothing better not happen to that young lady while you're out on a date with her. You know, that was the attitude back then. Now something happened, the guy running away, leaving the woman. It was just a different era, man. Again, I think it's the rise of the metrosexuals, you know. Men that don't accept responsibility and men that have more woman-like characteristics, you know. I just think that's where we are now. And I think it's by design. And it spills over to the topic that I'm talking about. A guy gets on the internet and he expresses himself on his channel, exercising his freedom of speech, and they can't handle it. So what do? They try to demonize you on the internet, right? Get other people, you don't watch that guy because he said this, or he's that way, or he's this way. It's cowards. I'm sorry, I'm from a different time. That ain't what we did. If you had a problem with a man, you looked him in the eye, you faced him, and you had that conversation. Or you went to war. Either you worked it out or you went to war. That was the only option. Now you can avoid talking to that person, right? You can avoid crossing that person's path and then say something in the comment or put something out or do a hit piece on them and never have a conversation with the person. That's the era that we're in. So anyway, I want you guys to meet a guy. I want you to meet somebody that's old school, that when I watched this video, it reminded me about everything I just talked to you guys about. Alright? In the way he sees the world. You know, he's a billionaire, and he chose to never become politically correct. So he's maintained the old ways of manhood, right? And even though he's 70 years old now, he still acts the old way. And it has pissed so many people off, but he doesn't care. He's going to be himself, and he's going to, never become politically correct. But he's a billionaire. Check it out. A billionaire that is not politically correct. Crazy.
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Dan Pena, who is an American-born businessman, entrepreneur, mentor, and creator of the Quantum Leap Advantage QLA methodology used to turn $850 into $450 million at the oil company Great Western Resources. You call yourself the $50 billion man because over the past 20 years, your mentoring programs have created over $50 billion in equity and value for your students. Some say more. You and I have a storied history together. We first met here in our studios 2 years ago. Followed by that, I attended your Castle seminar. We had our infamous event at the Ritz Hotel in London. I quoted you in my TED Talk. My daughter spoke at your 70th birthday party last year at Guthrie Castle in Scotland. Your episodes on London Real have been watched nearly 500,000 times. Dan Pena, welcome back to London Real.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me again.
It's great to be back here. You turned 70 last year. I was at your party. My daughter spoke. It was a tremendous gala affair. Your wife, Sally, did an amazing job. You know, most men might be planning their retirement in their 70th year, but from what I can see, it looks like you're ramping things up. And I was wondering why you think that way, and what does this next year look like for you?
Yeah, most of my contemporaries have toned their lives down, so to speak. And the last 3 or 4 years, I've done just the opposite. I didn't earmark 70 as to be a takeoff of anything special, other than in my 60s, I wanted to continue towards, from my middle to my late 60s, do more and more, and be more and more, because as you've heard me say many times, QLA and Dan Pena are synonymous with being all that we can be. And 70 is just a year. I don't feel 70. I don't believe I look 70. I certainly don't act 70. So it should not be anything other than another birthday. But I am ramping things up, but I have been ramping things up basically since I first met you, or actually before we first met almost 2 years ago, and we sat for our first interview. And because I'm trying to continue to push the edges of the envelope. One of the new things in the seminar, actually since you've been there, we've added, is that for the kids, and I call you all kids because I'm either old enough to be your father or your grandfather, the kids have to, in their weekly reports, which they have to register now daily, instead of weekly reports where they fill out the last day or two, it's daily reports that then they send me once a week. But you have to do something every day that scares you. and that's a takeoff from Helen Keller, who said, or not said, she was deaf, dumb, everything. She couldn't do anything. And she said every day she did something to scare herself. Well, if you and I had all those afflictions, just getting out of bed would be scary enough. And so I decided that one of the differentiations between the people that got the most out of the week-long seminar and the year-long free mentoring from me is people that really press themselves hard. So I translated that into they've got to do something and list it, what they did to scare themselves every single day.
What are some of those things that they do?
Oh,
Like, if you can talk about it.
we've got, yeah, well, a couple of them we can't talk about, but I mean, most we can talk about. We had a guy that went and jumped off, and this wasn't a daily thing, because it took him a week to do this. He jumped the highest bungee jump in the world. I recently bungee jumped a couple years ago, but I didn't jump off the highest. He sought out the highest, okay? Another guy sought out jumping out of a plane, and a lot of people jumped out of a plane. I have myself, without a parachute, and having a guy skydive to catch him. No chute, no backup chute, no safety chute. Well, I'd think twice about that. Although I've done it, I think twice. When I was younger, I think twice that, let's say Brian Rose is going to catch me, you know? I'm not so sure that would happen. So we have things like that. We also have things that, you know, just for a person that has never made a cold call, okay, make 100 cold calls in a day. A cold call is defined by not ringing it and getting an answering machine, but getting through to somebody, having to get by gatekeepers, secretaries. Others are making financial presentations. And it goes from there. It goes all over the board. But you have to do it every day, something. So in a month, you're doing it 30 days. And we don't give off weekends, in case you don't recall. I mean, that's 30 times. So by the time they get to the second or third month, and they've done this, and give them the benefit of the doubt, something happens. So then when you did it 20 times in a month, you do this 40, 50, 60 times, you're a different person. You're a different person. For example, one of the scary things one of the guys did was to tell his in-laws to stay out of their fucking life. He and his wife. Now, just imagine, you're going to tell your in-law to stay out of your fucking life. You're fucking up your daughter, my wife. That's a scary thing. Some of the things are, a daughter's going to tell parents, I can't be there every weekend to come and see you. And they're not sick and they're not dying or anything like that. And so, but you do something that scares you, because what we've done now is we've developed a methodology to make people feel comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's a quantum leap, pun intended.
Is that the essence of really what you do, is getting people to take more risk, or to get out of their comfort zones, and then the wealth comes later?
It's not just out of their comfort zones. It's to change your reality. Okay, you know, your reality is different than my reality. And, you know, your followers' realities are all different. But it's to change your reality. And to make yourself accountable. That's not just getting outside your comfort zone, making yourself accountable. Okay? Not just accountable, not accountable to somebody else, accountable to you, me, you know, yourself, because that's the ultimately that's the only person you should be accountable to, is yourself. And we grow up, in my judgment, wrongly, that that we don't hold ourselves accountable enough. We just don't. We've learned to come up with reasons why we can't do this, reasons why it's okay not to do this, reasons why you didn't follow up on time, reasons why I told the guy to get back to him by Wednesday. It's now Friday. Oh, it's the weekend. I'll now get back to him till on Monday. And life has gotten simpler now with the internet and with email and the things where the communication is almost instant. You'd think it should be easier, but it's not. I use the analogy: 25, 30 years ago, you go in to buy $100 million.
I guess YouTube don't want me to share this, so let me, your stream has been temporarily blocked because we detected an audio that is copywritten. Okay. It says your stream is no longer blocked due to your stream is no longer being blocked due to copyright because I stopped it. Okay. Okay, I guess I won't share that because he was about to get into some really deep stuff. Alright. Anyway, if you want to see that clip, you what's the name of it? London Real. And it's pretty interesting. And Dry Fire, you picked up on something that's very interesting. This guy right here, he was a supporter of the Nazis. Well, I ain't gonna say he was a supporter. I don't know what he was, but he mentions it because the guy says, "Well, I walked in your mansion and you got a picture of fucking Mussolini on the wall," or something like that. And the guy said, "Yeah, I'm an Italian, and I supported Mussolini, whatever." He said some shit like that, and then they just touch it briefly and go on. So yeah, he probably is a supporter of the Nazis or some shit like that. But that's irrelevant. What he's talking about is, well, I want to tell you what he's talking about. You should watch the clip. If you can watch the clip with an open mind, you'll see he's talking about how to empower yourself by not just becoming politically correct. That's pretty much the general message. He talks about a lot of different stuff. It's too bad I can't show it, but that's pretty much what he was saying. I really don't know why this was blocked. Maybe because, like Dry Fire noticed, he was a supporter of the Nazis or something. Don't know why they're saying it's copywritten, because it's not copywritten. I know that for a fact before I grab the clip. But look it up. London Real, Dan Penna. Check it out. It's a very interesting thing. He talks about how he looks at everyone the same, but he treats everyone the same. He doesn't necessarily modify himself politically to be politically correct based on the people that he deals with. He treats everyone, as he says, he treats everyone fucked up until they prove to be worthy of not being a typical fucked up individual. That's pretty much what he says. But he hits a lot of caveats in this interview, and that's the reason I wanted to show it. And I wanted to highlight that. But YouTube don't want me to show it, so I guess I won't be able to show it without getting my live stream shut down again. That's fucked up. So I really wanted to show that. Alright, give me a second. Let me get my backup reel. Banking. Totally shift the conversation. Are you aware of what's going on financially in the United States? Some of you may be, some of you may not. Well, let's just put it this way. Or will there be a consequence for the creation of $4 trillion in the last 4 to 5 months? Do you think that the government or the Federal Reserve can just create money and it doesn't have a impact on the economy? And if you do think it's going to have an impact on the economy, do you think it's going to be a significant impact, number one? And number two, what would they do to try to fix it? Well, there's a lot of experts right now having this argument and discussion publicly, and I like listening to them because don't nobody really know anything, but what they do know is how they've dealt with things in the past, right? If they're going to fix this problem, they're going to have to get extremely creative and do something they have never done before, which is also a level of risk, right? If they do what they've done in the past, they have to create inflation. That means the price of things will have to rise, meaning your purchasing power will soon be in jeopardy at some point. That's if they just follow how they deal with these types of situations from the past. No one really knows what they're going to do. But just recently, the Fed has come out to say that they're going to keep money at zero interest, which is crazy when you think about it. They're going to make money cheap to borrow, thus devaluing the dollar. So let's dive into that for a second or two, because it may be something that you haven't considered. And I like this guy because
Stop spending hours every day looking at charts and graphs, having no idea where to invest your money.
He's pretty comical, so a little bit of entertaining, but he's goofy too, so take it with a grain of salt. All right, Max Kaiser, check him out.
I am Max Kaiser. This is the Kaiser Report. I got my golden money printer gun ready to do the J. Powell. Do the J. Powell. We're getting ready, Stacey.
This is not virtual, this is real. They had virtual Jackson Hole. They announced their profoundly consequential ZERP forever. Essentially, we're going to have 0% interest rates for 5 years. That was on the advice of Plucky.
Plucky.
He's once again profoundly consequential to the world monetary system. So ZERP forever, as we have predicted here for years on Kaiser Report. Remember, we said you can't taper a Ponzi, and it turns out you cannot taper a Ponzi. They're admitting that. Of course, a lot of people love it because what happens? The markets boom, right? And the market.
I got my money gun. I got my money gun. My name is J. Powell. I got my money gun. I got my money gun. All I do is print all the day. Because I like to see the stocks. What? Because I own the stocks myself and I like to retire a billionaire and work at a hedge fund like all the other ex-Fed presidents do and make more billions. Because I like my money gun. Because I like my money gun. More to come on that. Work in progress.
Well, I found an analogy for what is happening here.
What?
Is it an analogy or a metaphor? Anyway, I found it in the Chicago Tribune. It's called vomit fraud, and it could make your Uber trip really expensive. So, you know, you get into your Uber at Grand Central and take it down to Freedom Tower, and you think, hey, that 25, 27 bucks, that's pretty good. The next day, you tune in to your account and you find that you've been charged $150, and there's a photo of vomit that you allegedly left in the back seat. Well, this is apparently rife at the moment on Uber. The drivers are claiming that somebody vomited in their car and that you're being charged $150. So this is what I'm saying is when you look at our financial system, that's in fact what you're getting with the Fed ZIRP and QE policy is they're charging you with the vomit fraud of the bankers, that they're the ones that issue debt that is unpayable and then dump it onto you, and they're sending you a photo of their balance sheet essentially saying, look, you did this, you're the one that did this. And you're like, hey, I was just like going out for some groceries and now it's 20% more expensive because of what? Because of this Fed vomit fraud.
Right, there's plenty of vomit fraud in the United States economy, and it's perpetrated by the Federal Reserve Bank. And you're right in that we are being charged for the vomit fraud. So when they make a bad policy decision by like QE for infinity, and this causes huge malinvestment in the economy, and let's say the bailout of insolvent banks, right? And the savior of Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway, even though they were technically insolvent back in 2008. That is the vomit fraud that we have to pay for. And then Warren Buffett will go on TV and he'll play his ukulele and he'll say, thank you for paying the vomit fraud, and I escaped insolvency. Then you have companies like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, HSBC. It's a global vomit fraud phenomenon. Every major bank in the world commits vomit fraud, and every major population in the world has to pay for the vomit fraud. You know, it's like money as vomit.
Yeah, and they sell it like, hey, this is an amazing app. Uber like lets you hail a ride wherever you are, and blah blah blah, and you don't need to speak the language, and it's cheaper, it's easier, and you know, it helps drivers who get to rent out their car essentially. And they say the same thing. It's like, we're providing liquidity, we're helping the markets, we're helping the
people. It's like providing liquidity, all right. There's plenty of vomit fraud liquidity everywhere. You know, I got an idea for a business. It's called Vomit DNA Kit. So if somebody, an Uber driver, tries to claim that it's your vomit in the back seat that they're going to charge $150 for, you can whip out your Vomit DNA Kit and say, prove it. I've got my DNA of my vomit right here. If you can match it, I'll pay it. If you can't match it, you owe me $500 for harassment, baby. Let's get these lawyers working overtime.
And you mentioned Warren Buffett, and I do want to say, you know, prior to this virtual Jackson Hole, the Fed had announced that they were going to announce something that was profoundly consequential, but we knew they were going to do that. We knew they were going to tolerate more inflation than the 2%. We knew they were going to keep ZIRP at 0%, not only because Kaiser Report said it, but because Warren Buffett fled, right? He dumped his bank shares. He gets the inside information. He gets to speak to these Fed executives because, you know, that's how they do it. You know, we have friends who are in many of these senior primary dealers, and what they say is that they get calls from the Fed who legitimately can say, we're just researching, like before we make any policy decisions, we're going to speak to senior bankers and find out what's going on. What they're really doing is tipping them off and saying, what would you think if we took rates negative? What would you do? And of course, they're telling the person, we're going to take rates negative, so what should you do? So Warren Buffett obviously is, you know, one of the most successful businessmen and investors in the world. So they're going to call him and say, hey, Warren, what would you do if we come up with a profoundly consequential negative, you know, 0% interest rates for 5 years? He's like, oh, good, thanks. You know, I'd be a little bit concerned, but do what you have to do. Sell JP Morgan, sell Goldman Sachs, go long gold.
Yeah, it's amazing with all that inside information that Warren Buffett has, that he's still underperformed the market now for 15 years. Incredible. That's the sign of a truly stupid person. But, you know, all this insider trading and the Fed's policy saying we're going to extend quantitative easing indefinitely, as you were saying, that's the worst kept secret in the history of the world, because there is only one thing they can possibly do. They can only print. You can't taper a Ponzi scheme, as we've often said before. They can only print, and they can only expand printing exponentially. Like any Ponzi scheme, you need a bigger base of the pyramid scheme. It has to get bigger and bigger and bigger. It is showing up in prices, commodity prices, and we do see people now reporting back and saying, hey, I can't afford food. I'm starving on the street. And the Fed's saying, well, send us some of your vomit and prove it. And then they say, well, I'm too weak to get to the post office and it's closed because of voter fraud allegations. They say, without the vomit, we can't send you any more checks. We got to send it to Jamie Dimon because we got his vomit and it looks like legitimate Jamie Dimon vomit. He gets all the money. You get nothing.
You mentioned commodities. Of course, aside from being a central banker, Plucky is a commodity. He is a chicken prices. food prices have gone up, and I think this is what the Fed will be using as well. Not only will they do a hedonic adjustment and say, well, you won't eat chicken, you'll eat chicken McNuggets, what are food-like substitutes, right? And look for ways to say that the prices are always declining. But if you look at the CRB index, the commodities index, you'll see the commodities inflation accelerating. Obviously, everyone who has it in their accounts is up 42% since May. Of course, there was a huge sell-off before May during the initial pandemic days. Again, the 42% is a huge increase in the commodities prices at a time when wages are going down and the governments, especially outside the United States, are running out of free money to give to people through this pandemic, especially that it seems to be the case that, they were hoping to extend and pretend and just another 2 weeks, just another 3 weeks, just another 4 weeks, just another 5 weeks. Now it's another few months, maybe next year, that we might be able to return to normal, some sort of a normal economy, whatever that is. If we, I don't think we'll remember what a normal economy was.
Oh, did I ever share with you my recipe for chicken lips?
No.
No, that's the classic Depression era recipe, which I think will get popular again, as well as dandelion soup. People, they pick the dandelions off the weed soup. It's a big one. But, the thing about this inflation also, remember that it's not so much inflation like people's wages are going up. This is inflation caused by the collapse of the U.S. dollar. So the U.S. dollar, because of all this money printing, is turning into the veritable garbage, like a Venezuelan bolivar or a Zimbabwe currency or Iran. So people are getting sent a lot of, checks in the mail, money in the mail, but that takes more of this garbage fiat money to buy the same amount of stuff like lumber, commodities. So it's an indication of a U.S. dollar collapse. Every empire clips their coins.
There's another perspective. I don't know if you guys can hear. Let me get closer to the mic. Dry fire, is my mic still that jacked up? Can you guys hear me? Because you said there was something wrong with my mic earlier, and I thought it was fixed. And I'm looking at my levels. Everything seems to be fine. Well, anyway, there's another perspective that I want to introduce to this too. All right. You saying it's really loud. Okay, let me turn it down. How about now? Can you hear me now? You can always turn your volume down too. I don't want to get too low. Testing. All right. So, why do all the nations in the world use the US dollar as the standard, right? It is literally the standard for all money, right? And we've been that way since the end of World War II, right? We were on the gold standard at one point. Nixon in 71 took us off the gold standard, said he was going to do it temporarily, and it's been that way indefinitely. Why is it that all the countries around the world still use the US dollar as the standard? And if you don't know this, I know many of you in the chat, you guys know this stuff, but for those who don't, that's the source of American wealth. The source of American wealth is that the entire world uses our currency. The entire world sees our currency as valuable. Now, just to give you an example, if I gave you some Japanese yen and you were not necessarily in tune with understanding the exchange system, right? And you tried to walk into, I don't know, a store and make a purchase, no one would take it on our economy. you would have to go and exchange that currency into U.S. dollars to buy anything on our economy for the most part, right? Maybe if you went into, I don't know, a Chinese store and you presented yuan, maybe they would take that. I don't know. But for the most part, the U.S. dollar is the standard for the entire world, right? Meaning, when countries trade on an international level, they're doing it in U.S. dollars. They're converting their nation's currency. Let's say you're China or, you know, Saudi Arabia or something. They're doing it in U.S. dollars, right? But their economies are based on their local currency. Why is that? When they got off the gold standard, why didn't the rest of the world say, oh, hell no. The money's not backed by anything. You guys can print as much as you want. You can inflate your currency. You're going to always have a surplus of currency for you, your country, and you're going to make it scarce for our countries. Why would they agree to that? Has anyone ever thought about that? Put it to you this way. Would you agree to that deal with a person on the street? That they have the ability to control the creation of money and you would be subjugated to that creation? You would never in a million years agree to that. But every country around the world has agreed to it. Well, I put an argument up a while ago that the U.S. dollar is backed by something. It's backed by the military. I think one of the things that we got to keep in mind is there's countries that benefit with levels of protection simply because they use our currency. So if you start looking at the military budgets, for example, of the top 10 countries around across the plane in the world, right? The U.S. spends more money, mainly because they create the money, right, than any other country. I think it's the top 7 countries or something like that. We invest more. And our militaries have more technology, bigger infrastructure, the whole nine. On top of that, we have U.S. bases all over the world. Unlike any other country. So if there was a problem in Europe, we have soldiers in Europe. There was a problem in any part of the world, we have a military that could respond quickly. Is it more like the mob where you do business with the mob because you know no one's going to mess with you, and there's a level of protection that comes with being affiliated with that country? Or do you think we're in those times where that doesn't matter anymore? That smaller countries don't need U.S. protection. So let's say a country like, I don't know, France is not protected by the U.S. in any way. Is it possible that Germany would take over France, or Russia would take over France, or something like that? Maybe France is too big of a country to use that example. Let's say a small country like Luxembourg, right? Luxembourg, very tiny country right next to Germany, between Germany and France. But they're an ally to the U.S. Luxembourg decides we're no longer going to use the US dollar. Have they just jeopardized their security? How about the Caribbean islands? Right? They decide to drop the US dollar. Are they allowing themselves to potentially be unprotected? Countries that could jeopardize their security, would they be quick to renege on the US dollar? How about Israel? Israel sits in the heart of the Arab world. It's an ally to the United States. One of the reasons that Arabs have not all come together and overtake Israel is because of U.S. and British support. Would they drop the dollar? So, the angle that I'm thinking here is these guys, these financial guys like Max Kaiser, who I like a lot here, they talk about how the dollar is going to tank and all the other countries are going to look for another avenue, which may be true, which I think is true. But it would be a strategic exit at a minimum, right? It wouldn't be, oh, well, the U.S. dollar's collapsed, fuck the U.S., and they step off. You still got the most powerful military in the world. When you say fuck the U.S. dollar, does that automatically mean that you no longer have protection from the U.S.? I would say yes. So, for many countries, it is not in their best interest to have the U.S. dollar collapse. Now, if you look at China, for example, who's jockeying to be the world's currency, if the U.S. dollar collapsed, does that also impact them? Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, are they positioning themselves to be able to recover from a U.S. dollar collapse? Probably. But would it be a strategic exit? Or would it be just, okay, the U.S. dollar's collapsed, the hell with the U.S. dollar, we're going off the U.S. dollar standard? Countries would really have to think hard and long before they made that decision. I don't think it would be an overnight, oh, well, the U.S. dollar is in crisis, we're getting out of it, and they all run for the hills. Well, is there a consequence for that? Could there be a consequence for that, for countries that do that? I think it would be. And I think many of them know that. So a complete U.S. dollar collapse, you can't compare it to a Rome, which many people do, because Rome didn't have the level of influence and power that the U.S. has. It's actually nothing that you can compare it to. Think about this again. I'm going to say it one more time. We're going to get back to their presentation. Every country in the world is reliant on the U.S. dollar. Every last country. The dollar collapses. What's going to replace it? In the fiat currency world, what's going to replace it? Could war break out simply because the U.S. dollar collapses? Absolutely. Think of a better time to attack the U.S. when the world no longer has faith in its currency. What happens to us living in the United States when the U.S. dollar collapses? Now, we may still have faith in it because we don't know nothing else but the US dollar, right? But it no longer has its international purchasing power around the world if there's a mass exodus. The other factor that I think we should always keep in mind as well when we're thinking about the possible outcomes of a US dollar collapse is the UN is a joke. It's a joke. That's like anybody that talks about, well, the UN is trying to do this and the UN was created by the United States. The United States funds the UN. A dollar collapses, who's going to fund the UN? So the UN has no authority over the United States, and that's been proven over and over again. Because all the US has to say is, we're not doing none of that. Fuck you. Russia does that too. China does that too. The big countries always tell the UN, fuck you. And when the big countries say that, there's absolutely nothing that the UN can do. But if America says fuck the UN is fucked. China's not going to rush to save the UN. Russia's not going to rush to save the UN. Even the European Union, if they don't have American support, is not going to rush to save the UN. The UN is a creation of the United States. And because it's the world's currency, it can manipulate it to be pretty much whatever they want it to be, to a degree. Now, you can always have people complaining and whining and saying, oh my God, U.S. is just dominating everything, you know, the small African countries and the small European countries or whatever, they can get up and say how bad the U.S. is being, as far as being tyrannical. They did that during the Iraq War. The war didn't stop. The UN didn't stop the Iraq War. Why? If it's a union of all the countries, how come they weren't able to stop the U.S.? You know, remember when when the decision was made to go into Afghanistan and go into Iraq and all that stuff, right around 2002, 2003, the UN was not in support of that. U.S. still did it. What's the UN going to do? So I'm bringing these things up because when I listen to these analysts, they lose track of that level of influence on that level. You know, they lose track of that. It's almost like they look at all the countries as being equivalent in influence and power. But they're not. They're not. Belgium doesn't call no shots on nothing. Right? Austria calls no shots on nothing. You got about 5 countries in the world that calls all the shots. 5 or 6 countries. What? U.S., maybe Brazil down in the south. Venezuela may have a little voice, but it's really so big. Europe, you're talking Britain, you're talking Germany, maybe France. Who else got a voice? Spain? No. Italy? No. The Vatican? Yes. Russia? Yeah. Go into African countries. Who got a voice in the African country? Maybe Nigeria. Maybe. But then you got to go to the east. Now you're talking about China. Japan has a somewhat of a voice. That's about it. Maybe Australia. That's about it. The rest of the countries just got to jump on bandwagons. So if the dollar collapses and your country is relying on that standard, how can you go against the U.S. not being that standard and still think you're going to get the protection from the U.S.? Well, the question could be also, if the U.S. dollar collapses and there's a mass exodus from the dollar, does that open the door for China to go around and colonize countries? How about Russia? Would that be the fear, if not the truth? Absolutely, that would be the fear. So I think as long as countries are on the dollar standard, they're awarded some form of protection from potentially being overthrown. Now that may seem outdated in this new technological era, but you got to imagine the dollar actually collapsing. If the dollar collapses, so does your protection. You got a lot of these little ass countries that is reliant on U.S. support in the event of a Russian invasion or a Chinese invasion or whatever country that decides that's bigger, stronger. And because that's what's going to happen. Why would that happen? Well, I'm Russia or I'm China, and the dollar is no longer relevant. But then you got some diehard people that's going to stick with the U.S. Now that country is in play. Right? And what makes it in play? Well, their money is no longer backed by the U.S., the empire of the United States, because the United States is an empire. I mean, it's truly the definition of an empire, right? Why not try to go over there and, convince the people to start using the yuan or using the Russian ruble or using the euro or whatever, because the dollar is no longer there. But what if those people resist, or they don't want to become a part of the fiat central banking cartel? Well, that's when you use force. And you force that country through armies and weaponry and all that stuff. It comes back to play. See, some people think that stuff is outdated. But if the dollar collapses, how else would you convince the world that you are the new currency if they're resisting? So this is the little stuff that I think about, that a collapsing dollar doesn't mean the end of America. It could mean that we're entering World War III, because I don't think America, those in control of the U.S., would take it lightly. They would not take it lightly. Oh, so you're no longer going to use our money. Okay. Well, we're going to send these Marines over there to convince you to not change that opinion. I can see that happening. What's at stake? The wealth of the United States. So every country that reneges on the U.S. dollar, it is reducing the potential wealth of the United States. Could you see America declaring war on countries that pull away from the dollar? Or they're just supposed to lick their wounds and accept that country no longer wants to use U.S. dollars, and now will only deal with Chinese dollars or the Chinese yuan or whatever? How would the U.S., those in control, deal with that? it'll be World War III. And you know what? I think they know that. So it's in your best interest, even people that's in opposition, like China, for example. They would love to see some type of weakening of the U.S., but they don't want to see a collapse of the U.S., because a collapse of the U.S. is going to prompt the U.S. to fight to keep what it has. If it fights to keep what it has, you're talking World War III. So now, let's say China, Russia, the United States, we all get into a big fight, right? What are they fighting for? They're fighting for world dominance. What's the world dominance? Who is going to use whose currency as the standard for the rest of the world? So a collapsing dollar, we're all thinking about the economy, but it's going to be much bigger problems that could get real physical and real violent. This little petty race stuff that we're doing in the U.S. is bullshit compared to people pulling away from the U.S. dollar. I'm of the opinion that smart people, while they're positioning for war and fighting over who's going to be the dominant currency, right? The smart people are going to be investing in crypto. That's what I believe. You know, I believe crypto is going to go through the roof simply because it will be an exit for getting out of the dollar as it's going down the collapse. That's the way that they can retain their purchasing power, because more and more businesses are becoming accepting of Bitcoin, for example. So when the dollar collapses, but you're heavily in Bitcoin, you're going to be able to preserve your wealth a lot more securely than a collapsing dollar. I think Rex said in the chat, the metals are great too, like silver and gold and that kind of stuff. The only challenge that I see with silver and gold is its purchasing power. You know, day to day, how do we pay for a loaf of bread, for example, or some milk? You're going to pull out a gold coin, you're going to pull out a bar of gold, and, you know, how I don't see how that would work, but I know they could create notes that are backed by that gold, but everyone doesn't have gold. So how could that be a replacement for a losing currency? But Bitcoin, for example, has the capability of replacing the US dollar just in the United States, for example. Internationally, there's people already using Bitcoin probably 3 to 5 times more than we do in the US. So the logical replacement wouldn't necessarily, in my opinion, be gold. It would be digital currency, i.e. Bitcoin. That would be the illogical replacement. One, it would be something that could easily be rolled out to the people, but two, it's already being used internationally. That could be a reason not to go to war. But there's a problem. Bitcoin is decentralized. No one has control over it. No one has control over Bitcoin. That takes away the heart of the power of the United States. Because if you control the money, you control everything. So a mass exodus out of the dollar into Bitcoin is likely, in my opinion, but it's not desirable to the controllers because they can't control it. They do not want Bitcoin to replace the dollar. So before they allow Bitcoin to replace the dollar, I'm predicting there's World War III first. Because think about that power that you're giving up, right? You control the central banking creation of currency that is the standard for the world. That means unlimited wealth for you. All of a sudden, all that is jeopardized. Are you going to fight to keep that? Or are you just going to turn it over to something that's decentralized like Bitcoin? Nah, they're going to fight that. And anyone that's saying we should replace the dollar, they're going to fight those people as well. And that's how you get World War III. Because it would be in the best interest of these bigger countries to side with those who want to change the standard from the US dollar to something else. So this particular problem hasn't been seen. So when they compare like Rome and places like that, I'm like, dude, Rome was nowhere near as influential as the United States. A collapse of the United States impacts everybody, even its enemies. Its enemies is using US dollars. If you want to consider China an enemy, if we don't even know what the fuck China is, but it doesn't necessarily have the best interests of the US, they say, right? But they are also impacted by a collapsing dollar. Russia, impacted by a collapsing dollar. Germany, the same. France, the same. Britain will be impacted by a collapsing dollar. Everybody will. You can't get away from it. So to go to something else pulls power directly from the United States. And guess what? That will be World War III. That's my prediction.
So when Jay Powell is like the Roman emperor, when he says, you know what, we're going to do quantitative easing for eternity, what he's saying is we're going to clip these silver denarius coins even more, and we're going to keep clipping them, and you're going to keep getting less and less money, and then the empire is going to collapse, and then we're going to go into a dark ages, and I don't care. Because I like my money gun. I like my money gun. Where's my money gun? I like my money gun. I'm Jay Powell. I'm out of my mind. I'm a Roman emperor that's throwing the entire economy under the bus because I'm a freaking venal crook.
Well, again, you know, you saw these signs coming because all of the #1 top investors in the world, whether it was Warren Buffett, whether it was Ray Dalio, whether it was Stan Druckenmiller, they all were exiting. They were all fleeing while the ordinary person was coming in, because the ordinary person does like they don't mind coin clipping if you have the bread and circuses, if you have all the fun games. And certainly we're having these bizarre games now in America, whether it's between the riots and like militias versus activists, like shooting it out on the street, burning down buildings, burning down cities. Maybe, you know, some people see that as fun, like gladiator games.
And that's just Don Lemon over at CNN.
Yeah, so, you know, that's part of the bread and circuses. We have these party conventions, which are, because I don't want to overmodulate and blow out the audio files, I won't act like Kim Guilfoyle.
Oh, wow. She was definitely excited.
No, but these are part of the economic coin clipping times. This is, you know, when the entire economy and your entire monetary system, all that it has left is vomit fraud and who you can package that fraud up and sell it to around the world.
Right, these are like gladiator games. Yeah. When you see these riots in these cities like Portland and Wisconsin, this is like the old gladiator times. You just put a lot of poor people out in the streets, give them some clubs and bats, and have at it, you know, for our entertainment. It's bread and circuses.
Rome had a lot of civil unrest as well. It's part of the, you know, the elite abandoning you. You know, they just leave you to fight for yourself, and that's part of what is happening. And you know, stress and distress and all those sort of things.
Oh my God, what could be better? Well, we're going to take a break and come back Don't go away. And remember, I got my money gun. Stay tuned.
This might be the most reliable way for ordinary traders to cash in on huge gains.
Welcome back to the Kaiser Report. I'm Max Kaiser. Time now to turn to Tyson Slocum. He is the Public Citizens Energy Program dude. Tyson, welcome back to the Kaiser Report.
Hey, always great to be here.
Now, more blackouts in California. What's the cause this time, and how does the structure of the regulatory system cause the blackouts, Tyson?
The grid operator is a private company called California ISO, or Independent System Operator, and they are tasked by the federal government to oversee all aspects of the grid. And on August 14th, and then again on August 15th, they had to declare what's known as a stage 3 emergency. That's the worst stage to be in, because it means that they don't think that they have enough power to meet demand. So they have to force parts of the grid to endure blackouts to help bridge the gap between supply and demand. And so they had to do that on Friday, the 14th, and then Saturday, the 15th. And the immediate cause of it on Friday was a very large natural gas power plant tripped. They weren't able to secure enough imports. And so it's just a complete disaster. And as a grid operator, they really should not be in any position to be calling for those rolling blackouts, because they should always have very predictable ability to foresee exactly what supply and demand is going to be. There was a problem with some of these natural gas generators, and on Saturday, a very large wind farm that had unscheduled outages. And so we have sent letters to federal regulators at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and to the president of the California ISO, the grid operator, asking them just to publicly identify the names of all of the generators that had unscheduled outages or were unavailable when called upon to provide power to the state. We just want the names so that we can do our own investigation into whether or not these power plants went down for legitimate accidental reasons, or whether they went down Enron style intentionally to create this artificial shortage. Because one thing that happened in the immediate wake of these rolling blackouts is prices in the wholesale market, of course, skyrocketed to, in some parts of the California market, to over $3,000 a megawatt hour, which is a massive increase. So the California market's plagued with problems. It's not the result of California's increased reliance on renewable energy, as the primary immediate triggers were actually the failures of natural gas power plants.
Amazing that they pay up to $3,000 per megawatt hour. You know, when the Bitcoin miners are paying less than 2 cents per hour. You know, it's like, you know, this U.S. federal government really stinks, because the word I caught in your explanation there was the word private, right? It's a private company. Energy, education, transportation, healthcare should be public. They should be run by the government. That's why I pay taxes. But instead, the taxes go to Wall Street, right? So 90% of the taxes of the Wall Street is owned by 10% of the population, and it keeps going up because, as even Nancy Pelosi just admitted, my money is going to pump. I have to buy stocks just to offset the donation that I'm giving to hedge funds just to make that whole. But, you know, the federal government in America really, really stinks to high heaven. Now, let's talk about California. Gavin Newsom, he's the governor. He recently approved a license for Chevron to begin solar-powered fracking in California. Is he brain dead? Is he on drugs? Is this an Orwellian nightmare? Is he just stupid?
Yes, it's ridiculous to approve whatever solar-powered fracking means. That it's a nonsensical term that just means that they're going to have a very expensive drilling operation that might happen to have a couple of solar panels on it. But there's no way that that solar is going to power all of the massive energy needs that a fracking operation requires. As you probably know, fracking, it's sort of like strapping a jet engine onto a drilling apparatus to force all of that water and chemicals and sand deep into those formations. It takes enormous amounts of energy, and an on-site solar array is really just going to be powering their coffee machines and the lights in the trailers. It's not going to be running this fracking operation.
Right. It's the quintessential example of putting lipstick on a pig. I mean, Gavin Newsom, if he bought a new automobile, a new Corvette, he would hire a horse to drag him around town, right? He doesn't understand that we live in, the guy is, I'm sure, I think he's clinically insane. Anyway, now Bloomberg reports that, this is interesting, you'll like this, Tyson. Botswana and Namibia are jointly to develop solar projects for as much as 5,000 megawatts through installations built across their mostly flat, sunny landscapes. So African nations seem to understand solar. Is this correct?
Oh, absolutely. This is one of the best applications for solar when you don't have an already developed grid infrastructure like they have in the United States and the United Kingdom and in most other fully developed countries. The challenge in a country like Namibia is how to get electricity to all the people and businesses that need it. And the cheapest way to do it is with solar, where you can have solar panels close to the sources of consumption in the villages and towns. You don't need to install a whole bunch of large transmission infrastructure to move that solar power from where it's produced to where it's consumed. Instead, you just site it right there where people live. And the great thing about siting a solar array is you don't have to worry about the environmental impact of that solar production facility on the water resources or emitting pollution. It's a clean, sustainable resource that can provide electricity for relatively inexpensively. And, you know, I had a good friend that actually worked with the US Department of Energy years ago on some small grant programs to provide this type of what's known as distributed renewable energy generation in African countries. And she told me that one of the top uses once a community in Africa installed solar was actually to charge up cell phones, because just like with landlines, there was no infrastructure. And so making sure you had reliable electricity for your communications infrastructure was actually priority number one, and then using it for lighting and cooking and cooling needs.
Speaking of Africa, I see that Nigeria is now 30% of the population is using Bitcoin as a unit of account. They're also using solar to mine Bitcoin. And so they're developing a circular economy, seceding from the global economy in a way that nobody's figured out. And they're making America look like the dunderkins that they are. Now, let me ask you this. This looks like bad news. Wired magazine recently reported that solar panels installed in the 1990s and early 2000s are reaching the end of their lives, and that there will be now toxic mess to clean up. So what's going on here, Tyson?
Yeah, so there's no question one of the issues with photovoltaic cells is you do have a lot of harmful chemicals that go into the production of those facilities. Of course, once they've been produced and they're in operation, they're a zero emission resource. But they do have an expiration date. They've got a shelf life. And so you have to have robust recycling programs so that the harmful chemicals that are within those photovoltaic arrays are being broken down and recycled in a way that minimizes environmental harm.
All right, let me jump in here for a second. So when you talk about the cost of solar, are you factoring in this, quote, robust recycling effort? Or is that going into your calculations, or is that an externality that you're not including in your calculations, just like the oil industry doesn't include their environmental disasters in the externalities of what they do?
Right. It is not currently included in the market price of solar. So it's an externality that does need to be accounted for. It is important to note that the oil industry, which has externalities all over the place, the you're having to constantly use a steady supply of petroleum as fuel to move your airplane or your automobile or
Yeah, all right.
power
So
your
Tyson,
industrial
you're over
process.
there, Tyson, at Public Citizens Energy Program. You're doing the research. You're a think tank. You're putting paper to pencil to paper. Do you know what the cost is, the real cost?
We don't know the exact cost, but we do know that it's likely going to be lower than the externalities for fossil fuels. And that's because the recycling and processing cost is a one-time cost that occurs at the end of the lifespan of the solar photovoltaic assembly. And so there's also valuable elements in there that can likely be sold for a profit. And so all you have to do is invest in the recycling infrastructure. And I'm confident that those externalities for solar are going to be far, far lower than what we see for the daily externality toll for fossil fuels.
I want to follow up on a question from last time we spoke. The USO, which is an ETF traded on the stock exchange, it faces a joint SEC and CFTC investigation as to whether or not investors understood the risk of the strategy. Now, we talked about it at the time, Tyson, that this was a bag of worms that was being sold as investment grade when it's absolutely not. What's the status on this? Because this is outright fraud, in my opinion, Tyson. What do you think?
Well, that's why federal regulators are going after them, because United States Oil Fund basically had to change the bulk of its investment strategy because one of its primary counterparties, the Royal Bank of Canada, that cleared all of its oil futures purchases, they basically told them in May, we're not doing this for you anymore, because that April 20th shock of oil prices going to negative $37 a barrel all of a sudden meant that some of those counterparties, like the Royal Bank of Canada or others, could be on the hook, and the investors in the United States Oil Fund could be on the hook for millions and millions of dollars in losses. And so it exposes a fundamental flaw of this ETF or exchange traded fund methodology that, as you accurately say, it's a bag of worms. And so they're in trouble, and they ought to be. We, from the very beginning, had problems with these ETFs going into commodity markets, and they are disrupting these commodity markets. They're creating a false demand that is negatively impacting the price formation in ways that are inhibiting the ability of actual folks that need to hedge their exposure to risk for either their production of oil or their consumption of it. These ETFs are messing around with it. So, the announcement by both the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Commodity Futures Trading Commission on August 19th that their staff has essentially recommended an enforcement action. This is sort of the preliminary step to the commissioners of both of these independent regulators taking enforcement action against U.S. Oil Fund.
Right.
But what's
and
crazy?
My understanding is that they're going to put that in front of the Queen, and then she'll rule on this as part of an inquiry, because it's the monarchy in the U.S., no longer a democracy. All righty, Tyson Slocum, thanks so much for being on the Kaiser Report.
Always my pleasure.
That's going to do it for this edition of the Kaiser Report with me, Max Kaiser, and Stacey Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Tyson Slocum of Public Citizen. If you want to catch us on Twitter, it's Kaiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.
I'm about to show you the quickest and easiest
All right. Money Show is delighted to welcome Peter Schiff, one of the few widely known economists and investment professionals to have spoken about the financial crisis before it even began. Peter, thank you for being here to kick off the event this morning. We look forward to your insights.
Oh, thanks for having me here at virtual Las Vegas for the Money Show. I was thinking just before I started to talk here about how many more money shows we're actually going to have. I'm not really sure. I think we're coming maybe towards the end of the cycle here, because I think the money that most people have, or at least what they think is money, isn't going to be money much longer. And so I'm not really sure how many Americans are going to have any wealth that they're looking to invest. I think most Americans are going to be struggling to survive, let alone trying to figure out where to invest money that has practically no value. The crisis that we are headed for now is really unprecedented in the world. Not that there haven't been countries that have been wiped out. I mean, we've seen hyperinflations, we've seen currencies destroyed, we've seen people impoverished. I mean, that's not new. This has been happening for a long time. What's really new is the scale. I mean, we're about to see a loss of wealth that's really unprecedented in the scale. How many people are going to lose money, or wealth rather, and how much they're going to lose? That's what's really unprecedented. And of course, it hasn't really happened in a nation as large as the United States. It hasn't happened with a nation that is issuing the world's reserve currency. So the bankruptcy of America, the impoverishment of America, a hyperinflation in America has profound implications far beyond the United States. So this is really going to be a global event, even though the bulk of the pain is going to be concentrated in America, and it's going to be experienced by Americans. And, it's not COVID. I mean, COVID-19 is not the problem. I mean, it's one of a number of problems, but it's not why we're about to go through this massive economic collapse. But it is the monetary and fiscal policy response to COVID-19, right? The government's cure is what's going to kill the economy, not the disease. And in fact, it's not just the mistakes that the government has made since COVID. It's all the mistakes that were made before COVID, right? The government just didn't start making these mistakes. The Federal Reserve didn't start QE with COVID. It started it a long time ago. This 0% interest rate policy wasn't invented because of COVID. It predated COVID. It was just resurrected on a much grander scale, which again is what I have been telling money show audiences for years. Contrary to a popular belief, everything the US government did in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis was a mistake. All the monetary policy was wrong. All the fiscal policy was wrong. As a consequence, we never actually recovered from that crisis. We simply made all of the problems that caused that crisis worse. And of course, the crisis was caused by the Fed, by the government, using the same policies that they used to respond to the crisis. Only the mistakes they made after 2008 were far bigger than the mistakes they made before 2008. And therefore, the bubble that they blew up was far bigger. And the collapse, now that that bubble is popped, is going to be catastrophic, right? When the 2008 bubble popped, we had the worst crisis since the Great Depression. This crisis will be worse than the Great Depression, much worse. And unlike the Great Depression, when we were still on a gold standard, money actually gained value. So if you weren't in the stock market, if you weren't in the real estate market, you gained purchasing power. Assets got cheaper for you. The cost of living went down. Americans are not going to be that lucky this time. Everyone's going to get wiped out. People who don't have any money invested in the stock market are going to get wiped out because the dollar is going to get wiped out. We should have had a U.S. currency crisis years ago. When I wrote my book, Crash Proof, back in 2005 and 6, and it came out in 2007, and when I was going to the money shows back then, warning about the housing bubble that the Fed had inflated and about the financial crisis that was going to hit when that bubble popped and the worst recession that we were going to get since the Depression, 10% unemployment, $1 trillion deficits, the bankruptcy of Fannie and Freddie, everything that happened in 2008, I was warning about for many, many years before 2008. But what I expected to happen as a result of 2008, I knew that the government would double down on its failed policy. I knew the Fed would slash rates. I knew they would start printing money again, and they would try to reflate the bubbles. My feeling at the time was that they would fail in their attempts to reflate the bubbles, and instead the dollar would succumb to these mistakes, and we would have a big drop in the dollar, and that would, relapse into a worse crisis. What I got wrong is that the world actually was fooled by our monetary magic, and the Fed was able to succeed where I thought they would fail. They did reflate a bigger bubble than the one that popped in 2008, but they're not going to be able to repeat the trick again. It is impossible to reflate a bubble bigger than the one that just popped. And so this is it. It's not three strikes or third time's the charm for the Fed, because they did it before, after the NASDAQ bubble popped. It's going to be three strikes and you're out if you are still in the dollar. The myth is that the U.S. economy was strong before COVID. It wasn't strong at all. It was the weakest it had ever been. It was the biggest bubble that had ever existed. That is why the economy imploded so quickly as a result of the COVID-19 lockdowns, right? Because we were so vulnerable. We had nothing saved for a rainy day. And it didn't just rain, it poured. And the air started to come out of this everything bubble in the fourth quarter of 2018. So we were already going to have this crisis. COVID just accelerated and is making it worse, but it was already inevitable. The air started coming out. The markets imploded in the fourth quarter of 2018. And the Federal Reserve, as I forecast at many money shows and on television, the Fed aborted its feigned attempt to normalize interest rates and shrink its balance sheet, something that I said from the beginning could never happen. And one of the only people that made that forecast. The Fed reversed course and began cutting rates in early 2019, and they went back to quantitative easing. Now, they didn't officially admit it was quantitative easing. They lied about what they were doing, but it was quantitative easing. Well, since then, since COVID, they've dropped the pretense. They now admit that they're doing QE. In fact, they admit that it's QE infinity, which again is another forecast that I got right. Long before QE4 started, even before we ended QE3, I said QE4 would be bigger than QE1, 2, and 3 combined. And that prediction has already come true because the Fed has already done more quantitative easing since COVID than in all of the years following the 2008 financial crisis. And the scale of money printing is unprecedented. The deficits are through the roof. We're running now $4 trillion deficits. The government is spending more money than ever before, where most of it is being conjured into existence by the Federal Reserve. The U.S. government is now spending more than 60 cents, or more than 60 cents out of every dollar that the U.S. government is spending is being printed. So the Federal Reserve is printing more money for the government to spend than the U.S. government is collecting in taxes. Now, you have to realize that doesn't mean that all of this government is free, that we've dramatically increased government, right? Donald Trump has increased the size of government more than any prior president. I mean, forget about Roosevelt or Lyndon Johnson. Trump is the biggest spender of all time, the biggest borrower of all time, and therefore he is the biggest taxer of all time, because every dime the U.S. government spends is a dime of taxes, whether they want to be honest about it or not, because government spending isn't free, right? It's paid for by Americans one way or another. And if Trump and Congress don't have the guts to be honest with the American public and give them an actual bill for this unprecedented spending orgy, right? They're just going to have the Fed print up the money. That doesn't mean we escape the bill. It just means we pay the tax through a different mechanism. And that mechanism is called inflation. And in fact, I just put up a video on Twitter and my Instagram page yesterday of Warren Buffett last year correctly defining inflation as a tax. It is an expansion of the money supply. Buffett said it's the cruelest tax of all, that fewer than 1 in a million even understand, which is true, and that's by design. The government has led a propaganda effort to confuse people as to what inflation is, but it's an expansion of the money supply. It is a tax. It is a tax on savers, on people that own dollars. So there's two ways the government can pay for its spending. It can collect taxes legitimately by taking your money, or it can do it illegitimately by taking your purchasing power. So let's say the government takes your money. They take money from you and they give it to somebody else. Now somebody else can spend it and you can't, right? You see that loss of purchasing power because money is actually taken away from you. But the other way they do it surreptitiously is they don't take anything away from you. They just print money up out of thin air and they give that money to somebody else. And now that somebody else spends something. But the amount of goods and services to buy hasn't expanded. The government doesn't print purchasing power. It just prints claims to the existing production supply of goods and services. So what happens is the people who get the new money go out and spend it, and that bids up prices. And so what happens is prices go up, and so now you have less, you can buy less stuff. Not because you have less money, but because your money is less valuable and prices go up. So we are about to experience in America inflation on an unprecedented scale in this country. We're going to see the cost of living skyrocket, and it's going to happen very, very quickly. It's going to hit people like a ton of bricks, and they're not going to see this coming, right? More people are going to be blindsided by the dollar crisis than by the financial crisis. And the dollar crisis is much worse than a financial crisis, because when we had the financial crisis, the Fed was able to print dollars to bail everybody out. Well, when you have a dollar crisis, that doesn't matter anymore. You can't print dollars because nobody wants them. And that means it's not just a dollar crisis, it is a sovereign debt crisis. It's not just subprime mortgages that are going to go bad. It is U.S. Treasuries that are going to go bad. And of course, if U.S. Treasuries are bad, so are all debts denominated in U.S. dollars. Corporate bonds, muni bonds, if you've got a pension, if you've got an annuity, you're going to get wiped out. The money that you receive is going to buy very little and potentially nothing at all. Because the only way the Federal Reserve is going to prevent the dollar from becoming monopoly money is going to be to finally do the right thing, something that it has resisted doing the entire time. The last person who did the right thing is no longer alive, Paul Volcker in 1980. The dollar was collapsing in the 1970s. Why? Because we printed a lot of money in the 1960s, and then we went off the gold standard in 1971, and the dollar tanked. It lost about 2/3 of its value against other fiat currencies like the Deutschmark, the Swiss franc, the Japanese yen, and gold went up 20-fold from $35 an ounce to over 800. Oil went up 10-fold. The dollar was going to get killed back then, but Volcker allowed interest rates to rise to 20%, and that put a floor beneath the dollar. That's what it took to rebuild confidence in a dollar that was no longer backed by gold, that was no longer as good as gold. Well, back then, America was the world's biggest creditor nation. We were the world's biggest surplus nation in trade. We had a lot of manufacturing. We had a high savings rate. And Ronald Reagan was president. That is the opposite of the situation that we're entering into now, where I think we're going to have a Democrat president, but it really doesn't even matter because Trump is like a Democrat, except he's not as bad as the current crop of Democrats. But I think we're going to have a real Democrat instead of a pretend Republican. And a Democratic Senate. But interest rates can't go up to 20%. They're trapped at zero. We can't even afford 2%, let alone 20%, based on the enormity of the amount of debt that we have now. But in order to stop the dollar from collapsing, the Federal Reserve has to let market interest rates rise. Who knows how high they would go? I think the rate would actually have to go above 20%. But here's the problem. We can't even afford a fraction of that. So if the Federal Reserve does the right thing to prevent the dollar from collapsing, the U.S. government will have to default on its treasury bonds. The majority of debtors will end up defaulting, not just the U.S. government. And the government won't just default on its treasury bonds. It will default on its pension obligations. It will default on Social Security benefits, Medicare benefits, on guaranteed loans, on the guaranteed pensions and bank accounts. All these empty promises are going to be exposed if the Fed does the right thing. But again, what's the odds that they do the right thing, given how painful doing the right thing is going to be? So instead of doing the right thing, they will double down on doing the wrong thing or triple down on it, and they are not going to let interest rates go up. So the dollar is going to fall through the floor, and inflation is going to ravage the United States, because what happened in 1971 is America went off the gold standard, but the world did not go off the dollar standard. What's about to happen is the world is going to go off the dollar standard and go back to the gold standard. That is where we're headed, because the system that we have now does not work. You cannot back your currency with an unbacked currency. Prior to the dollar being the reserve currency, gold was the reserve. Gold was money that backed up all currencies. America convinced the world to back their currencies with dollars because the dollar was as good as gold and was redeemable on demand in gold. And once we conned the world into holding onto our dollars and buying treasuries, we screwed them by defaulting. But they held our treasuries because they still got, 5, 6, 7% interest. And they still regarded the dollar as safe, even though it was no longer backed by anything. Well, now they don't get any interest on owning their treasuries, and they can see that we are going to print money into oblivion. This crisis is just getting started. The money printing is just getting started. As I said, the Federal Reserve now, or the government, is printing 60%, 60 cents out of every dollar spent. Soon that's going to be 80 cents out of every dollar, and the dollar is going to get destroyed, and it will no longer be the reserve currency. The world is going to remonetize gold. That's why gold is already over $2,000 an ounce. It's going much, much higher than $2,000 an ounce. And it's not just me saying that. Warren Buffett is finally voting with his feet. He is selling banks and he is buying gold stocks. We know what his position in Barrick Gold was 7 weeks ago. What we don't know is how much more he's bought in the last 7 weeks, or what other gold stocks he bought while he was doing it under the radar. But it's out in the open now. Buffett is not the last institution to buy gold stocks. He's one of the first. This is going to be a tidal wave of money moving out of U.S. dollars. The U.S. dollar index, as I'm talking, is almost ready to break through 92. This is the lowest it's been since May of 2018. The dollar is going to keep falling until it eventually collapses and we end up with this crisis. But what you have to understand is the entire American economy is built on the foundation of the dollar being the reserve currency. That is the secret sauce that makes this whole economy work. Once that is no longer the case, once the dollar is just another currency, then it's all over, right? It's the end of the game for America, because now we can't consume unless we produce. Now we can't borrow unless we save. We've been getting a free ride on the global gravy train. Well, that train is coming to an end, and America is going to have to deal with its greatly diminished standard of living at a time where capitalism has such a black eye. And I've never seen socialism more popular with the electorate than it is right now. What's about to happen, this economic disaster of unprecedented scale with civil unrest that's going to far exceed what we saw with the riots that we had with the Black Lives Matter. It's going to be much worse. We're going to have shortages of food that are going to be much greater than what we temporarily had when people were rushing to stock up COVID. Shortages of energy. It is going to be a very, very difficult time. And Americans, I think, are going to blame capitalism, and they are going to, entrust unprecedented amounts of power in the U.S. government. So we're not only going to lose a lot of our money, but we're going to lose most of our liberties, our individual rights. So this is going to be a very, very difficult time to be an American. But the one thing that I can try to do is at least ease the financial pain, right? Because you have a little bit of time to buy gold at $2,000. Now you might think, well, Peter, is that expensive? No, $2,000 gold is cheap. And you're going to look back at $2,000 and think, gee, that was a low price. Silver is even cheaper. Silver is still below $30 an ounce. Gold and silver stocks are a bargain. And especially now that Warren Buffett has green lighted these stocks, you're going to see more institutions. So you got a Europe Pacific Capital. Here's what we're doing. And again, Windows going to shut very quickly. So don't wait, right? You got to get out of dollars. I can manage a portfolio for you of foreign stocks, foreign bonds, precious metals, gold stocks. I have individual separately managed accounts. I've got 5 mutual funds, which, by the way, you can buy any of my mutual funds on most of the discount brokerage firm platforms, or you can work with me directly at Europe Pacific Capital. You can open up an account, work with our advisors, transfer in a retirement account, an IRA. I mean, if you want to retire, this is what you have to do. Otherwise, your money's going to retire and you'll never retire. So you gotta be proactive and recognize that you've already pressed your luck. The fact that we've gone this far without the dollar collapsing, it can collapse any day. It is like literally a bomb, right? And it is going to go off We just don't know how long the fuse is. Is that my 20 minutes?
No, you can keep going. If you want to do 5 more, we can leave time for a Q&A.
Oh, I don't know. How much time do I have? 20 minutes or 30?
You have 10 minutes left.
Oh, it's confusing. Okay, good. I have 10 more minutes. Yeah. So the key is going to be to get money out of US dollars, right? Because it's the dollar that's going to be collapsing, right? If the debts can't be repaid, they're repudiated. They're repudiated through inflation. So that means that if you have liabilities in dollars, well, those liabilities are extinguished, right? So the US government doesn't really owe the national debt anymore because it doesn't matter because the money's been wiped out. But the problem is when you wipe out the student loans and the credit card debt and the auto loans, you also wipe out the assets. And the people who are at the money show are on the losing side of this transaction. You've got assets that are about to get wiped out. And it's not just your own assets. Let's say you have an insurance policy. Well, now your insurance company is broke because the insurance company owned the assets that now have no value. So how are they going to pay claims? They can't, right? All the financial wealth gets wiped out. The people who are not wiped out are the people who saw the writing on the wall in advance and got out of these paper assets before they collapse. And if you think, well, I'm in US stocks, that'll be okay. Look, being in overpriced US stocks is better than being in dollars in bonds, right? The people in bonds could lose everything. If you have good companies, you may not lose everything, but you still could lose a lot. You have to realize that the American economy in the future is going to be extremely destructive to the value of US companies. Not only are taxes about to go up, corporate taxes, but the tax on dividends and capital gains is going to go up. So you remember corporations have a double taxation. And so to really value a corporation, you have to look at its ability to pay after-tax earnings. And you have to take into account taxes on both levels, at the corporate side and at the shareholder side. And since both are going to go up, we're going to see at least a 60% increase, if not more, in corporate taxes next year. And that's going to destroy a substantial percentage of the value of US stocks in real terms. And so US stocks are not going to represent a good place to hide. And of course, they're already so overpriced, right? Their earnings are going to evaporate. The only thing US stocks have got going for them is their debt is going to get wiped out, right? So but they're not going to have the revenue because their customers are also going to get wiped out. So you can't really hide in US stocks. You can't really hide in US real estate. You've got to be in foreign stocks. You've got to be in companies whose customers are not in America. Because if your customers are broke, then what good is your business? And you don't want to be within the regulatory reach of the US government that is going to be treating corporate America like a social experiment, right? New regulations are going to be coming to US companies that basically put the shareholder in the back seat. US companies are going to be required to prioritize their workers, their stakeholders, and they're going to have to start hiring people not based on their quality, how good they can do the job, but they have to make sure they're the right race, they're the right gender, they're the right sexual orientation, the right age. It's all going to be about making sure that we have this diverse workforce, not making sure that we have a good workforce or a productive workforce. So this is just a disaster on so many different fronts. And it's going to be so much worse than anything that I thought was going to happen when I was writing my original book. Because had we had the dollar crisis, 8 years ago, it wouldn't have been as bad. I mean, it would have been terrible, but it wouldn't have been as awful as it's about to be. And the politics wouldn't have gotten this bad, and Trump probably wouldn't have been in office. And the problem with Trump is that he is going to further tarnish. He's going to do more to discredit capitalism than George Bush did, because the last financial crisis happened when Bush was president. This one is happening when Trump is president. And it's going to enable the left, that is now far more socialist than it was when Obama was president, to further put the blame on capitalism. When this crisis had nothing to do with capitalism, capitalism would have prevented the crisis. It was socialism, central planning. And of course, now even the people in the Trump administration look at Larry Kudlow, whose motto used to be free market capitalism is the best path to prosperity. Now that he's working for government and advising Donald Trump, he no longer believes that. He now believes that central government planning and socialism is the best path to prosperity. He came out and said that. He said that the government needs to borrow heavily now and invest in the economy. So he doesn't believe the private sector is the engine of economic growth. He believes the government is the engine of growth. He believes government bureaucrats are smarter than the free market and they know how to plan, and that printing money is better than earning money. So everybody has now accepted the false doctrine. I keep hearing, we're all socialists now. That's the problem. The Republicans have been socialists for a long time, but in the process, they've given capitalism such a black eye that I don't think it can recover. So I think we're in the worst possible position that we could be in heading into this crisis. And I can't stress enough how important it is that people act. Don't even wait till tomorrow. Start today. Start getting out of dollars, out of U.S. stocks, getting into foreign stocks, into precious metals, into mining stocks. I mean, if you want to own stocks that can go up 10 times, 20 times, 100 times, those are the stocks that can do it. Anyway, I will open it up to questions if that's something we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of questions here for you. So let's see. Cryptos is a way of avoiding the US dollar. Is this a way of forcing alternative currencies?
Well, I think cryptos are just a speculative asset that has been pumped up and is benefiting from the idea that the dollar is going to go down and gold's going up. But, I've said this many times, it's fool's gold. It is an accident waiting to happen. The people who are in cryptocurrencies will be wiped out. They are fiat cryptocurrencies. They're no better. In fact, they're actually worse than all the other fiat currencies that are out there. I think it's a giant, a pyramid scheme. If you own any of these things, you should get out. And if you don't own them, don't buy them. All you are is going to be a bag holder. And there's going to be a lot of tears. A lot of very disappointed millennials are going to be broke because they put their faith in fool's gold instead of buying the real thing.
Thank you. Next question. I hear you saying that the U.S. will have issues, but since we are so much of the world economy, won't the whole world reset with us?
It's going to reset, but it's going to reset in a positive way. Remember, I said that America has enjoyed a tremendous subsidy because of the dollar's role as the reserve currency. So Americans collectively live beyond their means. And that means the rest of the world collectively lives beneath its means to make that possible. So America gets to consume stuff that it didn't produce. The rest of the world produces a lot of stuff and it doesn't get to consume it. America borrows all this money, but doesn't have to save it. The rest of the world saves all this money, but doesn't get the benefit of those savings because they loan the savings to the United States. So it's really going to be like a seesaw. As America goes down, that will lift the rest of the world up. Our loss is their gain, right? So America is the nation that has benefited the most from this fiat monetary system, and it has the most to lose when it comes to an end and we go back to a real monetary system based on gold. So yes, it's going to be very global disruptive. I think the economies that will benefit the most are the emerging markets, which is why you should have good exposure to the emerging market economies and own emerging market stocks, which we do. I have an emerging market fund that we manage. That is going to be where huge gains are made. These emerging market stocks are very, very inexpensive, not only in real terms, but in relative terms compared to the US. And one of the reasons that they've been so weak has been the false perception that the dollar would keep rising. Once the speculators are proven wrong and the dollar collapses instead of going up, that is a giant burden removed from these emerging market economies. It wipes out their dollar debt. It frees up their governments. They no longer have the inflationary pressures, the interest rate pressures. So we're going to see some economic booms outside the United States as we see the mother of all busts happening inside the United States.
Thank you, Peter. We see this question a lot, and here it is again. So are you asserting buying gold stocks or ETFs or the real metal?
Well, look, I like buying real gold, and Shift Gold is my company, and you could buy gold and silver from me. You don't buy numismatics, don't buy rare coins. That's all a scam for the salesman to make more money. You want to buy bullion, bars, and coins as close to the spot price as you can. You don't want to be a collector. You want to be an investor, a saver. But, You can still buy the ETFs as well. If you have an IRA or something and you don't want to deal with having physical gold, I mean, we can do physical gold for you in an IRA, just a little bit more expensive. But look, these are third-party custodians. I mean, so what happens if they don't actually have the gold? That's the risk. You have counterparty risk. And there are storage fees. The storage fees are not that high, though. They're reasonable. But, you know, so they're okay. But gold stocks is a different animal. See, that's what Warren Buffett bought. He didn't buy physical gold. He bought gold mining stocks. Now, of course, when you buy a gold mining stocks, you're buying the gold that they have in the ground. So you have to be bullish on gold to invest in a gold mining stock, because when you own a company, you own their inventory, which in this case is all the unmined gold. But I think there's a huge leverage play. I think if the gold price doubles, gold stocks can go up 5 to 10x. If gold price triples, gold stocks can go up 10 to 20x. I think there's tremendous leverage to the price of gold built into these stocks. So physical gold is to preserve your wealth and not to go broke. Gold stocks is a levered bet on gold that can make you rich. And so most of my personal portfolio is in mining stocks, right? And so I'm trying to make a lot of money off this crisis, not just preserve what I have. I mean, yes, I have physical gold and I have a lot of conservative assets. So even if all of my gold stocks become worthless, you know, I'm fine on my other assets. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think the gold stocks will go up, you know, and I think I'll end up amassing a tremendous amount of wealth as a result of owning these stocks. And I believe the same thing will happen to other people who, you know, who own these stocks as well. It's not too late to buy them. It's not even close to being too late.
That's great advice. Thank you so much. And for the final question, I hear you have a bank becoming available to Americans. When is that coming?
Yeah, you know, the regulations on offshore banks are really, really brutal. And so everything that you want to do there just takes forever thanks to government. So I was hoping that maybe by next year we could open up the bank to Americans. I don't know. Hopefully that will be the case. And I have I have other programs I want to launch with gold and my new Visa card and different ways that, you know, because my bank treats gold as money. It looks at gold like the euro or the Swiss franc or the pound or the dollar, and it allows all sorts of functionality with gold. Again, the biggest impediment to any of these kind of innovations is always government. Government tries to slow you down. They claim it's because of money laundering, you know, terrorists and drug dealers. It's all a bunch of BS. They're trying to maintain their power. They're trying to crack down on, you know, tax evasion. But more importantly is they don't want competition in money. And gold is the competition that they fear most. So it is an uphill battle, but hopefully we'll be able to, you know, fully roll out what I want to do with my bank. But in the meantime, just get out of dollars. Don't wait for my bank. You can work with me at Euro Pacific Capital. If you're not in the United States, you can work with me at Euro Pacific Asset Management. We finally got approved. Hallelujah. We got approved by IROC in Canada. So we're now a registered RIA in Canada. We're registered in all the provinces up there. It took forever to get through that, bureaucratic, a spider web, but we finally did it. But we're working with clients all around the world through Euro Pacific Asset Management in Puerto Rico. So go directly to my website there. If you're foreign, EuroPacificFunds.com. If you're domestic, you can see the URL, Europac.com on my shoulder. Make sure to follow me on social media. You know, I'm on YouTube. My YouTube channel, The Schiff Report, now has over 365,000 subscribers. Subscribe to that. You can also listen to the podcast on Schiff Radio, you know, iTunes, Stitcher, all these places. I now have over 285,000 Twitter followers. So follow me on Twitter. I just joined Instagram last month. Not quite 50,000 people follow me there, but it's brand new. I intend to try to use that platform a lot, particularly to get to the younger audience, but follow me there. Facebook, whatever I'm doing, because the media, the conventional financial media is putting out a bunch of nonsense, a bunch of crap, a bunch of government propaganda regurgitated. If you really want to know what's going on, if you want the real story as this crisis unfolds before the blind eyes of the conventional media, then you got to be exposed to me. You got to listen to my podcast on a regular basis, read the stuff I write, and invest according to the principles that I'm laying out.
Awesome. Thank you. That's all we have time for, but I got to say that was a fantastic presentation. We really appreciate you sharing your insights with us today.
Okay, sure thing. And I'm doing the debate tomorrow with Stephen Moore, so that should be fun.
That's definitely going to be awesome.
All right. I played Peter Schiff just as a caveat beyond that one video I wanted to show. My opinion of Pete is he's selling gold and silver. He's a salesman. That's what he's doing. I don't think he's looking at the whole picture. It would be very sensical to include precious metals in your portfolio, but to make it appear that that's going to be the replacement for fiat currency I think is a little naive. They're not going back on a gold standard. They're not. Why? Well, they don't control all the gold. Again, we're talking about tyrants here. We're talking about people that are managing an empire, right? So you're going to give up that power for countries that's rich in gold, like Africa, for example, or the continent of Africa. They're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. They're going to come up with an alternative. And I believe the alternative is more likely cryptocurrency that they create that is centralized. That's what they're going to try to roll out. They even said it. They even told you. They said they're coming out with the digital dollar. The digital dollar is a cryptocurrency. The difference between the U.S. digital dollar and Bitcoin is decentralized, meaning there is no government that controls Bitcoin. Centralized U.S. digital currency is a centralized currency controlled by the Federal Reserve. So they're going to make this big hoopla about we're going to become a cashless society, and they're going to control the creation of, or they're going to come out with a new money that is going to be beneficial for everybody. But actually, is just more control. Because think about it. If physical money is replaced with digital money, US dollar, you got a digital dollar, which is equal to a physical dollar, right? If that happens, that means because it's digital, they're going to be able to track every single dollar in circulation. Because it's digital. It's going to leave a footprint as it goes from person to person, purchase to purchase, savings to savings. The government is going to know every aspect of our money. Every aspect. At least when you have coins and paper currency, they don't know where it's at. They don't know how you spent it. You know, if you didn't spend it, let's say you gave somebody $100, right? With traditional currency. The government don't know you just gave somebody $100. But when you make it digital and you send it from your digital wallet to that person's digital wallet, that's going to leave an audit trail. So they're going to know how money travels from point A to point B because it's digital. That gives them more control over the currency by making it digital. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is they could take it away with the push of a button. Now, some of you say they could do that now, but let's say they freeze your accounts, right? And you can't get any money out of the bank, out of the ATM or whatever. But what if you withdrew it in cash before they closed your accounts? That now gives you the control because you have the physical cash. But if they get rid of all physical cash and all money is on a digital wallet, they could turn it on and they could turn it off. One of the examples that I heard was they could when they put money in circulation that's physical, they can't force you to spend it. So let's say you were saving your money. You got you get a direct deposit of your paycheck, and you pull it all out of the ATM and you put it under your mattress. Right? You get it, put it under your mattress. Put it under your mattress. Put it under your mattress. The government doesn't know what happens to that money. It's under your mattress. You're saving it for a rainy day, or you're saving up to buy something big. If all money is digital, it could actually have a time limit on it to force you to spend it. So let's say your paycheck is you received it on the 1st of the month. It could actually have an expiration where if you don't spend it, you lose it within 30 days. That could be a method to force spending in the people. Will you spend your money if it's digital, if it expires within 30 days? That would force you to go out and buy something, purchase something. Then that will give them ultimate control, and that will guarantee that the currency is constantly in circulation the way that they want it. They want you spending money versus investing money, and possibly even saving money. So they can force the economy when it becomes digital, or force currency to flow simply by putting expiration dates on it. Imagine welfare, for example. You know, a person gets welfare and you have X number of credits or digital dollars on a card. You know, if you don't spend that money by the 30th day of the month, it goes away. People are going to spend. That's a strategy to stimulate the economy. So going to a digital dollar will lead to those types of things. If they need a stimulation to occur in the economy, all they got to do is put a time limit on it. In 90 days, here's $1,000. You got to have it spent within 90 days. They got you. But look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin is decentralized. Nobody can force you to spend anything. Nobody even knows who owns what. So I'm banking that no matter what happens, digital currency, more specifically Bitcoin, is going to rise to the occasion, because it's a guarantee, more of a guarantee, I should say, more of a guarantee than central fiat currency. You know, now the currency plummets, or somehow inflation kicks in and it gets ridiculous, you're going to need more and more money to buy the thing itself. But what if you converted your fiat currency while the price is low in Bitcoin into Bitcoin? You've converted it, and then the dollar tanks. What happens to the Bitcoin? Well, there's going to be more and more people joining the cryptocurrency market, thus Bitcoin, and Bitcoin will rise. Based on the demand, the price goes up. So as the dollar goes down, Bitcoin goes up. Those are the trends that many of us are following now. So no matter how you look at it, no matter which direction if you go with a Biden, or if you go with a Trump, or if you go with some type of crazy Federal Reserve solution to our financial problems, none of that impacts Bitcoin. It just doesn't. And it's already being traded massively on the international level. If anyone's late to the game, it's people in the U.S. Because most people in the U.S. don't even know what cryptocurrency is, let alone Bitcoin. So if you don't know about Bitcoin, you need to really dive in, put a couple of weeks of study, review all the information. It's not that old. Bitcoin is only 11 years old. It started after the last major financial crisis in 2009. It's 11 years old. And there's people who are millionaires today because of Bitcoin. Like 100 millionaires, I don't know if there's any billionaires, but there's people that's worth hundreds of millions of dollars because they got in with Bitcoin. And the future of Bitcoin is nothing but upward mobility. It's not crashing. It has nothing to do with the dollar. The dollar crashes, Bitcoin's still going to be there. It's all about value, protecting the value of your wealth, right? So if you have money in a savings account, that is more vulnerable than you owning Bitcoin in this day and age. It's more vulnerable. So as more people learn about Bitcoin and get involved in Bitcoin, the price of Bitcoin, the demand goes up and the price goes up. With more demand, more value. Now the question is, in our present day climate, with the direction that fiat currency is going in, and what's going to become even more scarce is gold, because the price of gold is going up. If the price of gold is going up, where are you going to get the money to buy the gold? You can buy $1 or a Satoshi of Bitcoin. You can buy that. You can buy, $5 of it, $10 of it, $20, 100, 100,000, a million, 2 million, 5 million. You can buy as much Bitcoin as you want. Can't do that in gold. As the price goes up in gold, the less opportunity you will have to buy it, because the way you buy gold is with fiat currency. Well, I guess you could use crypto. But either way, you got to get out of the dollar. Right? And most places ain't going to accept a transfer of gold for Bitcoin. But it will. It's coming in the future. So again, no matter how you look at it, no matter what angle you take, Bitcoin is going to be the thing of the future. And of course, precious metals are going to always be relevant as well. So if the dollar does 50% of what people are saying, Bitcoin is going through the roof. Something to think about. All right, let me check the chat and I will wrap it up here. If anyone is interested in joining our investment group or learning more about it, because we got a ton of information to share, learning more or joining, I'm going to put my email in the chat. Send me an email and you can get started right away. What I will tell you about our investment group, there is absolutely no one in our group that has not made money on a daily basis being a part of our group. And it has a lot to do with what we talked about here today. There's people that are consciously thinking about the future and how to maximize their protection of their currency. Now, you could just go down with the ship. That's cool. Because, our government, they're going to come up with something, right? The question is that something going to be beneficial for you? So, If you're interested, there's my email. Every single day, our investment in the foreign exchange market is producing anywhere from 1 to 3%, 5 days a week. So that means if you have $100,000, which I'm striving to be at, and I will be at by the end of the year, invested in our group, if you take the lowest number of 1%, a daily return for that $100,000 package is $1,000 a day, roughly. And of course, it fluctuates because there's a market. But the one thing I will tell you, we're only getting positive results. You know, I want it to be 3% every trading day, but it's staying right in between 1 and 3%, averaging 1.4, 1.8, depends on the week. But think about that. On a daily basis, your investment is growing substantially. If you got $1,000, you're making, what, $10 every day? By the end of the week, you got $50. So your $1,000 has created $50 in 1 week. Those are the minimum numbers that we're seeing in what we're doing right now. So that's the one thing I want to protect. I don't want something that's extremely successful and people are benefiting from to be jeopardized with my rhetoric on the internet. Therefore, if you want to talk about it, if you want to learn more, if you want to join, send me an email. My email's in the chat, and we'll break it down. I will hold your hand and walk you through the whole process. If you come in with me, I would be your direct sponsor, making sure you understand every single thing, and then I unleash you to just grow your account. And it will grow organically, but there's other things you can do to earn even more money on top of your daily earnings. And that's pretty much what I'm involved in. And right now in my life, it ain't too much more important than this, because my objective is clear. Financial freedom, no matter what. It's all about financial freedom, right? Because to truly break away from the control system, you can't have 1 foot in, or you shouldn't have 1 foot in, criticizing the system, but at the same time feeding the monster. I'm tired of feeding the monster. Therefore, I want to be completely financially free on my terms. Meaning punching a clock and all these other things, which I don't do anyway. I run my own business, but I don't even want to run my own business anymore. I want to hire somebody to run my business. And with this particular investment strategy that I'm working on, and that many other people are working on, that's now an option. So that's where I'm at with it. If you want to learn more, get at me. I will holler at y'all. This is the Vegan Warrior, and grow your money, because if you don't grow your money, who will? Peace. I see you guys on the other side. One.